Is the Retevis RA85 a reasonable choice for an inexpensive GMRS handheld? In this video, we'll take a comprehensive look. Hi, and welcome to the Gadget Talk channel, where we do reviews and how-tos on a variety of electronic gadgets that catch my eye. If you find this video helpful, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the Gadget Talk channel. Recently, Retevis offered to send me an RA85 GMRS radio to use and review. I said yes, and in a few days I got a pair of RA85 GMRS radios to take a look at. In working with the radios and in doing some research, I discovered a couple of things that you'll want to be aware of before ordering. Here's a spoiler alert. Even with a couple of user-correctable shortcomings, they're a good value at about $40 for one or $70 for a twin pack on Amazon. Since this video is a bit long, I've included chapters so you can skip around to the parts that interest you. Now, before we jump into the review, just a little background. The original version of the RA85, which I got from Retevis, by the way, came with two annoying setting issues. They came with each of the 60 channels set to a variety of CTCSS and DCS codes. Since they were both the same, out of the box they'd work fine with each other. Here's a screenshot of the out-of-the-box channel configuration. For most users here in the US, that use case just doesn't apply. Most US users want no CTCSS code set since they don't often use them and they're easy to set when they're needed. That means you'll need to change the CTCSS codes on each of the 60 channels. Now don't worry, it's easy and I'll show you how. The next issue is that all the channels in the version 1 model of the RA85 were set to narrow band. This proves to be a bit more confusing in that neither the customer programming software for the version 1 of the RA85 or the menus in the radio itself allow you to make that change to the bandwidth from narrow to wide. Wide is what's used here in the US, except for the GMRS interstitial channels 8 through 14. Again, I'll show you how to easily make that change too. It's easy, but not necessarily obvious to a new user. Now, version 2 of the RA85 corrected these problems. Unfortunately, you really don't know what version your seller will send you right here in September of 2022. This is not the first time that I've run into this. Since the radios come from China, I'm chalking it up to cultural differences in determining a typical use case. The good news is that besides taking a few extra minutes to set up the radios, the fixes are free and they're easy. Now, with that out of the way, let's start by looking at the radios, their primary features, and how they work. So let's start by looking at what comes in the box when you order your RA85 from Retevis. It charges via a wall wart, and this is a USB wall wart, so it's a 5-volt thing. It comes with a USB-C charging cable, and then the charge cradle itself is plugged in via that same USB-C. So it charges using that 5-volt system that you use with almost all of the rest of your USB type devices. So all in all, that's pretty handy. It also comes with a belt clip that clips to the back of the radio, and there's a lanyard in there. Now, a lot of the radios I get, the screws are mounted in the radio, but here the screws are in this bag, so be careful when you open it up. And then, of course, there is the Retevis owner's manual that you see here, and It's a brief guide to all of the major functions of the radio. It's written pretty easily. A lot of it's in table format, so there's a lot of information crammed into each of these particular pages. So that's the owner's manual here. So let's take a quick tour of the radio itself. So here's the Retevis RA85 radio. It looks like a lot of handhelds. It's plastic, but it doesn't feel plasticky. It's really pretty solid. It fits well in my hand, and all in all, it's a really comfortable little radio. Here on the front, you can see transmit and receive LEDs. On the top, there's a flashlight or flashing strobe. The on-off button is right here, and then the antenna is here, and the antenna is glued in, so it isn't going to come out. So for example, I wasn't able to measure power output using my power meter because I didn't want to break the antenna off. For most people, antenna taking on and off doesn't happen anyway, so I don't know that it's a big deal, but it's something to be aware of. Here on the front, then, there's a little hole right here, and that's the microphone. You've got the screen here that we'll look at in more detail in just a minute. You've got the VM button here, which changes from the VFO to the memory mode. In other words, frequencies to channels. The AB button, which changes which of the lines of the display has priority. So the upper line is line A and the lower line is line B, and you can have two different channels set in each of those two different registers. On the front here then are the keypads. These don't have shortcuts to the various menu items on them. They just have the typical A, B, C, D, E, F that you might find on an older telephone. The menu button is here. You can change channels by pressing the up and down buttons there, or dialing in a 3-digit number to select the channel you want. You can initiate scan over here. You can lock the keyboard over here. And then here, if you're in the menu mode, which we'll look at in just a second, you can exit menu mode by pressing the exit button. On this side of the radio is the push to talk button. It's pretty typical up there at the top. It fits right on your thumb really easily, so it's got a good ergonomics there. This is side key number 1. This is side key number 2. They are programmable. We'll look at those when I turn the radio on here in just a second. And then on the back we have the battery, and then 2 holes for the belt clip that comes with the kit, and then a little hole here for the lanyard. Now the lanyard is, I found, quite difficult to fit into that little teeny tiny hole, but it is there, so that's what it is. The battery comes out really easily. It simply comes out. You can see here the model number and the FCC ID are on this sticker right here, and then on the battery you see it's a 2-cell LiPo battery, 7.4 volts, 1800 milliamp hours on the battery, and it just fits in there quite easily. You just slide it in, push the button, and it slides back in. Now on this side, we've got the typical K connector, K1 connector, where the speaker, mic, or the programming cable fits. And so one is an input, one is an output, and in this configuration, they're different sizes. But all of these Chinese radios use that same connector. So, a speaker mic would work, your programming cables and so forth all plug in right there. And then down here, there's another USB port for the charging of the radio, and it's a USB-C port. Now I have plugged my charger in there, and it doesn't have any indicator that I could find that shows that I've got it plugged in right, or that the battery's charging or finished charging. So I find that it's nice to have this, but I didn't find it particularly helpful because of the lack of an indicator. The charge cradle itself has an indicator, so charging on the cradle is probably your best bet. So that is the radio. Let's take a quick look at some of the things in the radio when it's turned on. Okay, so let's turn the radio on using the button at the top.
Welcome. Channel mode.
So it tells us we're in channel mode. And so we can change to the VFO mode by pressing the VM button.
Frequency mode.
And then back to channel mode. And then AB, you'll notice that the little caret here will go to the bottom if I press AB. And then you'll also notice that across the top, there aren't any little icons. It says H for high power. There's no CTC set here, so there's no CT icon, or are some of the other icons available. You'll also see that I've gone through and fixed the wide narrow thing since there's no N there. If it's in wide mode, it's blank, and if it's in narrow mode, there's a little N up here at the top. So let's just take a very quick look at how the menus work. I've got the backlight turned off because it tends to blow out my camera. So hopefully you can see the letters that are coming up here in how this all works. So if we press the menu button, it starts with menu number 1, which is squelch. If we want to adjust the squelch, which you can see right here is on squelch level 3, we would press the menu again, and that opens up the choices, and then we use the up and down buttons to change the squelch. I'm going to leave it on 3, and then I'm going to press menu again to confirm. And then I can use the up and down buttons to go to other menu items, such as transmitter power, power save mode, Vox level. They're all listed here in the owner's guide, so I'm not going to explain every one of these, but that's how you would get to them, or you could just type the number in. So if I wanted to go to menu 12, I could type 12, and now that gives me the receiver CTCSS code, which you can see is off. Now when I'm done making my channel changes here in the radio, I just press exit, and the menu system is exited, and you go back to the operating mode. Now, a couple of other things I wanted to point out to you here on the side key buttons. If you press the side key button, the lower one, side key number 2,
On. Thursday night, clear.
and then if you press it again, it turns off. That, of course, was the NOAA, and in this case, NOAA Channel 1 is what covers this part of the country, or this part of the state. So it was on Channel 1. To change your NOAA channels, you can use the up and down buttons to scroll through the various NOAA channels. The other thing you can do with side key number 2 is press it long press, and that will get you into the FM mode. And I know that I've got a channel here in Phoenix that's 99.9. And so you can see that. Turn that off so I don't get a copyright problem here with YouTube. And so that gives me my external kind of radio receive frequencies that will help with this with if you want to use it in a bug out bag or as a prepper. Now, the other thing I wanted to point out to you that I mentioned in the description here is that if you press this side key number 2 while turning it on, and you get this display, it's a version 1. If you press the side key and hold it and turn it on, and it comes up and says firmware 1.00 point whatever, then you've got a version 2 radio. So just to point that out to you here. Now, side key number 1 has the same thing. It's got a short press and a long press function. So a short press gives you the light. Another short press turns it off. A long press gives you a siren. And I've got this set to just broadcast over the radio speaker, not over the transmitter. So those are the settings for the side key number 1. So that's a quick tour of the Retevis RA85 and a quick overview of how you operate the menu system. Now let's take a look at how to set up your radios, especially if you've got a version 1 model. As you can see in this screenshot, the version 1 customer programming software, or CPS, shows all the CTCSS codes that come pre-programmed into the radio. You'll also notice that there is no column to select wide or narrow bandwidth. If you get the version 2 model, that CPS will have a column for bandwidth. You determine which model you have by pressing the lower side key on the HT while turning it on, as I just explained. If you get a screen that gives you the firmware number, you've got version 2, and the rest of this really doesn't apply. If the radio just turns on and changes to FM broadcast mode since you're pressing side key 2, you've got a version 1 model. The firmware upgrade and the CPS for version 2 don't work with the version 1 radios. You'll also notice that there are 60 channels that basically repeat the first 30 channels in channel memories 31 through 60. You can set any memory channel to any GMRS frequency, which is handy, but since that can get confusing, I'd limit custom channels to the second bank of channels in positions 31 through 60. The drop-down boxes in the frequency columns can be set to any GMRS channel, so multiple channels with differing CTCSS or DCS codes for the same frequency are possible. This is particularly helpful when you have several repeaters in the same general area on the same channel that use different CTCSS or DCS codes. Be sure the simplex channels show the same send and receive frequencies, and the repeater channels show the 5 MHz offsets. Now, if that sounds like gibberish, take a look at my video on understanding GMRS repeaters. I've gotten a lot of comments saying that the video helped folks understand repeater operations. Ultimately, the version 1 CPS isn't too helpful in fixing the RA85's issue, and as I said, the version 2 CPS doesn't work with the version 1 radio. So, what's a person to do? Fortunately, the fix is easy and it's free. After working through this fix, there will be virtually no difference in the two versions of the radio. Since the RA85 has been around a while, it's supported by Chirp. Chirp is an open source software project that folks use to program lots of these small HTs regardless of manufacturer. Here's the link to get the program, and I'll link it in the video description below. There are lots of good Chirp tutorials on YouTube, so reference those if you need more explanation than what follows here. To use Chirp, or any CPS for that matter, you need two things besides the radio and the Chirp program. First is a programming cable. I'm using the one from Retevis that was packed with one of my two radios. Besides the branding, it looks just like my Baofeng programming cable. Second, you need to know what COM port the computer assigned to the USB cable. Use the device manager in Windows and expand the ports choice. Look for the prolific USB device and note the COM port number. You'll need that. Prolific is the brand of the chip mounted in the cable that translates the signals to and from the radio. With the radio plugged into the cable and the cable plugged into the PC, open Chirp and turn on the radio. Now, let's jump into the program and go through what you'll need to do to get your radio all set up. Okay, so here is the opening screen for the Chirp software that we'll use to program the RA85. And the first thing we're going to do then is we're going to go up here to the radio and we're going to select download from the radio so we get what's in the radio to start with. Now we get a dialog box here, and prior to starting the program I looked at my device manager, and there you see it here, and you can see that I've got my prolific serial COM port in COM 9, and so that's what I wanted to see. So I've got COM 9 selected there. There are a bunch of different radios listed here by manufacturer. I have Retevis selected, and I have the RA85 model selected in the model drop-down box. So at this point I'll click OK. So now we see the cloning bar coming across. It took a couple tries to get it to talk, so don't be surprised if that happens to you. So here's the information that I downloaded from my radio. I pressed the location button here to get all of the locations. So you can see I have them listed 1 through 60 right here. And here we've got the GMRS channels 1 through 22 plus the 8 repeater channels and a couple that I have added. So let's go on and explain what's happening here. These columns will be filled when you first download your radio. Those will have those random CTCSS codes. And the way to get rid of those is to go up here to tone mode and select a channel, double click here and select none, which is what you see. To add a tone, we would go to tone, double click, and we would select the CTCS channel, in this case 69.3 hertz, which is the subaudible tone. And so we see now when you look at yours, it's going to say tone in Chirp, and it's going to, all these are going to have numbers, which of course we don't want. So to make the change, we'll go up here to tone, we'll click none, and you'll see that the number disappeared. Now, with those channels that have the CTCSS code, we're going to basically do the same thing. So you're going to clear all of this stuff out because we just don't want to be messing around with those codes. Now, the other thing that this allows us to do is here in the mode column, this is the bandwidth. And so you can see I've got this selected at high power and FM, which is the same as wide FM. Channels 8 through 14 are the interstitial channels. They are, by regulation, narrowband channels and low power. And so again, to click this, double click it, and you can make the change. In this case, we want it to be narrow FM. When you download your radio, all these are going to be narrow FM if you've got version 1. And so we don't want that. We'll make the change and we'll just click on each of these, changing them all to FM, except for the versions 8 through 14. And then in the second round of channels where those are duplicated, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to change these to high. We're going to make sure that these are all FM except for the equivalent interstitial channels, which remain at narrow band. Now, the other thing that I've done here is important because I don't remember frequencies, and no one does. They always talk about channels. It's a channelized system. So I named each of my channels. So channel 1 is GMRS-1, channel 2, GMRS-2, and so forth, so that when it shows up on my screen, it shows up with something that's meaningful to me, not the frequency. So I've got these labeled 1 through 22. Now, when you get to channel 23, these are the repeater channels. And so within Chirp, you're going to notice that I labeled it RPT23. You could call it RPT1 if you wanted. Sometimes you see radios that way, but it's the GMRS channel 23, so I called it repeater 23. In this column, I changed the duplex to plus because it's a positive offset in the GMRS world, and it's a 5 megahertz offset. So I typed in 5 megahertz, 5.000. So that sets me up for a repeater where the receive frequency is 462.5500 and the transmit frequency, the radio will convert automatically on these repeater channels to 467.5500. So that's how you set up the repeater. Now, if we look down here, we see that we can get all the way down to our repeater channels when they go down to 28, 29, and 30. Now, you'll also notice that I'm missing channel 31, so let me click on here and get to channel 31 where it's displayed, and you can see that in 462.725 is a local repeater here in the Phoenix area on Shaw Butte. It's called the Shaw Butte repeater. It has an input tone of 100 hertz, so I've got it set to tone 100, positive offset, 5 megahertz. It's FM, so wide band, and on high power. So I've got the Shaw Butte repeater programmed into channel 31, and when it's on the display, it'll show Shaw Butte. And I can add as many repeaters that I choose here in this column. So that's a quick overview of how to fix the shortcomings of the initial programming on the RA85 from Retevis. Once you've got this done, it is in good shape. It's going to work just fine. Now, when I finish this, I want to do two things. One, I want to go up here and I want to save as, find a place to save it. I usually save mine with the date, so 2022 09 14, which is today's date, and I may call it RA85. I'll save it to some place where I always save these kinds of data files, and so then I can use this if I were to mess up the radio at some point, or just revert back to the copy that I know that I want to use, and then I can make changes as I depart from that. The other thing then I'm going to want to do is I'm going to go to my radio and I'm going to upload to my radio, and I'm going to get my COM9 Retevis, and it's all there. And again, now the radio is flashing and it's uploading to my radio. So now when I turn my radio on, all those codes are gone, everything's set to high, and that Shaw Butte repeater is programmed into the radio. Now, before I leave this, let me point out that there's a settings tab, and the settings tab allows you to make some of the changes that you can access via the memories. And so I have my squelch level 3, I've got my backlight, I can change that to be on for say 5 seconds. I want channel display on each of these, A and B, the language is English and so forth. In my advanced, I can put a delay into my push to talk. I can do my transmitter dual receive. I can enable it or not. That way I listen to both A and B. In this case, I only want to listen to A or B. So I've got that disenabled. I can enable the beep, busy channel lockout. My alarm mode is to sight, so the little siren will only sound on the radio. The DTMF stuff I don't mess with. I've got my scan mode set to time operation, so it'll scan until it finds a carrier, and then it'll hold there for a few seconds, and then it'll start scanning again. Here are the programs for the side keys, and you may want to get all this done before you read it back to the radio, because these just save automatically. So in this case, then I've got my radio programmed, everything is working good, and that's how you use Chirp. Now all the changes are programmed into the radio's electronics and you're ready to go. You'll see all but channels 8 through 14 are wideband, as the N in the display is missing. No channels have CTCSS codes, and all channels have names instead of frequencies displayed on the screen. If you got an RA85 twin pack, connect the second radio to the programming cable and write the changes to that radio too. So, is the RA85 GMRS radio a good choice? As with so many of these small HTs, the answer is yes, for the right person and the right communications needs. For someone who wants to keep track of family members while camping or at a festival of some kind, or to communicate around a small family farm or warehouse business, the RA85 is a solid GMRS radio that will work just fine. It has a sturdy build and all the basic GMRS functions you'll need. If you're looking for a radio for your bug-out bag, or if you're a prepper, the radio's ability to access NOAA weather channels and broadcast FM stations is a plus. The drawback for the prepper use case, however, is limited receive-only channels. Other GMRS radios have as many as 200 programmable receive channels for such things as ham repeaters, marine band channels, and non-digital public services frequencies such as fire and ambulance dispatching. If you're a serious prepper, you might find that the RA85 comes up a little short in that regard. All things considered, the RA85 is a good choice in the inexpensive GMRS category. Besides taking a few minutes to clean up the programming issues, once completed, you've got a solid take-anywhere GMRS radio that will meet the needs of most GMRS users. Hey, if you found this video helpful, please mash the thumbs up button below the video and subscribe to the Gadget Talk channel. Click the bell icon to be notified when I post new videos. Thanks for watching.